Hello and welcome to UELtras on Ranks FC, the show that talks you through Europe's most exciting club competition, the Europa League, and its new baby brother, the Europa Conference League. I'm Jack Collins, and today we're going to be looking at the biggest storylines out of the first leg of playoff round fixtures, and of course, looking forward to the biggest games in that second leg. So let's start with the Europa League. And firstly, what a set of games. It's very rare that you see 8 games played, and you can look to the Champions League for this, and you'd argue that 0 of them are done and dusted. The closest I think we have to it is that Sevilla beat Dinamo Zagreb 3-1 in Sevilla at the Pith-1, where the final is going to be held. But Tottenham found out last year that you cannot be lackadaisical about a 2-goal lead if you're going to the Maximir. But we have to start with the big shock and the big storyline from last week's first legs. Rangers going to Dortmund and absolutely tearing BVB apart in front of the yellow wall. Simply put, what an outrageous performance this was from Giovanni van Bronckhorst's Rangers in the Stefan Klos derby. Yes, Dortmund were a little bit all over the place defensively, but take nothing away from this Rangers performance, and especially from this front line. Ryan Kent, probably the player of the week, I would argue, in the Europa League, tied Manuel Akanji up in knots down that left-hand side. Yes, Akanji forced out to play right back and not his natural position, but even still, this was a performance that, well, look, Kent tied him in so many knots that he managed to go off injured with a muscle injury. And obviously, no one wants to see that. But it's kind of a fitting end, it felt like, to how incredibly good Ryan Kent was and how Akanji just couldn't deal with him. Up top, Morelos bullied Dan Axel Zagadou. He forced mistakes, and then he took advantage of the ones that Zagadou made himself. And he made quite a few at both ends of the pitch. And yet you'd say this isn't quite over. Rangers are 80% of the way there, I'm pretty sure. But, I mean, there's 2 reasons why. One is the question of, could Erling Haaland return? Now, by the time you watch this, it might have been confirmed. It does look likely that Erling Haaland is going to be ruled out of this one. He started training with the first team on Monday. There are contrasting reports at the moment coming out of Germany, but it does look like he hasn't travelled. Thomas Meunier has, though. He'll slot in at right back or right wing back, depending on how Dortmund do this. The other reason is Jude Bellingham. He felt like he hauled Dortmund back into this game on his own through sheer willpower at times across the course of this fixture. Dortmund then went and won 6-0 against Borussia Mönchengladbach at the weekend. Not quite as convincing as a 6-0 might be, but still much better than Rangers did. They drew 1-1 with Dundee United. 30 shots at Tannadice Park, 3 on target. Not great from anyone, and a very similar team to the one that lined up against Dortmund. So potentially one to be worried about there. Like I said, 80% of the way, I think Rangers are at this point, and Ibrox is going to be absolutely buzzing. So where is it won and lost? I mean, whoever plays right back against Ryan Kent, and we saw them shift shape at the weekend. Emre Can played right centre-back. Torgan Hazard played right wing-back. I wonder if that is planning ahead to try and double down on the threat that Kent posed to them. Like I say, Meunier come back in. He might be the one that slots into that right wing-back slot. Torgan Hazard might move further up the pitch to slot into the spot that Gio Reyna left vacant, or Julian Brandt might get another chance. He was a bit of a ghost last week. No Akanji, no Zagadou. We saw Pongracic come in at the weekend. Can Rangers target him? He's had a bad season in his debut campaign at Dortmund. It's not been easy pickings by any stretch of the imagination. So Rangers will look, I'd imagine, to target Pongracic if he comes into that spot. Daniel Marlon was excellent at the weekend. Again, someone who really didn't step up during this Rangers game. If he can reproduce that kind of performance at Ibrox, where you'd imagine Rangers will be willed on by the crowd, there might be a little bit more space in behind for Dortmund to exploit. Then he could maybe have a say, but it's going to be really interesting. Like I say, Dortmund need to make this crowd nervy. An early goal, and suddenly an Ibrox that is going to be absolutely full, absolutely bouncing, on the verge of making history with what would be an incredible result, will get nervous if Dortmund get that first goal. They absolutely need to if they're going to make this tie competitive. Let's go to the Diego Maradona derby. Napoli against Barcelona. 1-1 after the first leg. How Barcelona did not win this, I will never know. Ferran Torres got the goal for Barcelona, the equaliser, but he missed a hat-trick of golden opportunities. Luke de Jong nearly scored a bicycle kick. Everything was a little bit all over the place. But Barcelona feel like they're really growing into this Xavi system and his coaching. It feels like they're improving every week. And if they get through this tie, there's a question kind of hanging over all of it. If they get through this, do they become the favorites by the time the last 16 comes around? Obviously, it depends on the draw, etc., etc. But the way that they're playing, the way that they're improving, and some of the results they are getting in La Liga, they were sensational at the weekend against Valencia. There was a rondo in the opposition half at one point. It's a team feeling themselves. Adama Traore, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang have added a real directness, and the latter a real goal threat. Ousmane Dembele came on in this first leg and he was unplayable, going both ways. Napoli did not know how to deal with him. He earned himself a start against Valencia at the weekend where he was excellent again. We're starting to see talks of Aubameyang trying to convince him to sign a new contract. Whether Aubameyang will be there or not next season is a different question. But there are still defensive vulnerabilities in this Barcelona side, as emphasized by Napoli's goal, where Pedri, as brilliant as he is, and probably the best young footballer on the planet at this point, just fails to track Zielinski at all. Lets him run scot-free into the box, and he hammers a strike into the roof of the net. Nobody's saving that. There is this kind of sense that Barcelona feel when they're passing the ball around, when they're knocking it about, when no one can get near them, there is that sense of, inevitability about them. And yet they can be torn apart. And they were by Napoli for that goal. Yes, they should have won the game, but still it's 1-1. It's on a knife edge. Napoli passed up a chance to go top of Serie A on Monday night as they made 5 changes in their game against Cagliari, which they then drew 1-1 and didn't go top of the league. I did think it showed a real competitive nature in trying to win this competition. It's important to them. And there was a lot of people wondering whether now they're in a Scudetto title race and whether the Europa League would take a back seat. It doesn't feel like it has done with these changes that Spalletti made. You'd imagine Meret, Osimhen, Fabian, if Insigne's fit, they all come back in here. They're massive players for Napoli. They also tried to switch to a 5 at the back, which didn't really suit them massively. I'd imagine they go back to a 4-2-3-1 here. So where's it won and lost? There's a big question over who plays at right back for Napoli. Giovanni Di Lorenzo went off with a head injury, said he was seeing stars, which didn't seem great on Monday night, which means that he may well not be fit for this. Kevin Malcuit came on in that game, did okay, to be perfectly honest with you. But he would be coming up against Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, which is very, very interesting if that's going to be the matchup, especially with Alba coming off the back of a hat trick at the weekend. Not sure I would have given him that third goal, but alas, who am I to argue with the dubious goals panel? Anguissa and Lobotka injured in the middle for Napoli. Now that's massive because they need to try and shut down this Barcelona midfield to stop them playing the way they did at the weekend. You'd imagine Diego Demme comes in to play alongside Fabian Ruiz. Fabian is obviously going to be massive. He's going to be key. But Demme was okay at the weekend. Now, he was in a slightly unfamiliar position. It was a kind of 2 in midfield with him and Zielinski, with Zielinski playing the more offensive role, and Demme kind of tucking in behind him. But this is a massive step up. He needs a big performance. Koulibaly was magnificent in the Camp Nou. He needs to produce that kind of performance again at home. I think before this started, I had Napoli down as slight favourites. Now I reckon Barca edge it, which is kind of not what you expect after the first leg is tied at Barcelona's home ground, but I'm going to go for it. I think Barcelona get through here, and I think that will make them massive favourites for the competition. Over to Seville then, and Real Betis 3, Zenit St. Petersburg 2 on aggregate after the first leg, which was in St. Petersburg. This one fully exploded into life. Betis 2-0 up within 20 minutes. It looked like it was going to be plain sailing, and then 10 minutes later, it was 2-2. Europa League doing mad, chaotic Europa League things as usual. Betis were happy to kind of sit off Zenit and play reactively in transition. It's not really how they've played hugely across the course of this year under Pellegrini. But I'd expect that to change at home. I'd expect Fekir, maybe Canales to feature, especially if this is still tight at halftime. This is a very good Zenit side, but you'd think that Real Betis have enough to see this through at the Villa Marine. It's been a really tough place for people to go this season. It's also a bit of a strange time for Russian football. It's about to kick back off after their winter break. Zenit are currently top of the league, but there were definitely some rusty moments in those opening minutes in St. Petersburg. They made sloppy mistakes for 2 of the 3 goals, especially the winning goal, which Guardado scored. Zenit were masters of their own downfall in so many ways in this game, and potentially have done enough to make sure this is the downfall across the course of the tie as a whole. But where's it won and lost? I think that big battle in the heart of midfield, when Wendell started to get on the ball and play, Zenit came to life. They started to make serious strides into the heart of that Betis midfield, and that's where both of the goals come from. Betis end the game with 3 in there, having started in a 4-2-3-1. William Carvalho, Andre Guardado, and Guido Rodriguez. Guardado played in the slightly more offensive role, scored a goal, his first in Europe for about 8 years, I think. But I think that was testament to how well Wendell and Vilmar Barrios did. Kuzayev dropped in as well to create those overloads. I wouldn't be hugely surprised if Betis revert to a 4-3-3 or at least a 4-2-3-1 with maybe Canales in the 10 who will drop deeper in order to stop that happening again. And I think this is all on the fast start. If Betis score first again, and if they score early, I think it could be done before Zenit realise that the tie is even upon them, and that could be curtains at the Via Marine. They're all late games, so I want to quickly talk about an early game. We'll talk about Real Sociedad against RB Leipzig. I think it's the best game in the early slate. Porto, Lazio, we talked about last week as well. But this one was really intriguing. It was super end-to-end in the first leg. L'Oréal held their own better than they expected. Obviously, we thought Christopher Nkunku would shine. He still had a massive say in this one. But you look at the weekend, Real Sociedad were battered at San Mamés in the Derby Euskal. They lost 4-0 to Athletic Club. And it was a really weird performance, especially in the second half. It looked like they were drained of all sort of vitality. As soon as the deadlock was broken, the floodgates really opened. And Athletic missed a penalty in this one across to Leipzig, and they hammered Hertha Berlin 6-1. It's some way to recover from a disappointing result at home. So I think I still give Leipzig the edge here. But I thought that before the first leg, and I was surprised as how close it was. So shouts out to L'Oréal because they impressed me in Leipzig. I think RB probably have enough to get this done. But of the early slate in the Europa League, I think this is the most exciting. 2 games in the Europa Conference League to talk about as well. Starting in the Arctic Circle, Bodø Glimt went to Celtic Park, went in to Parkhead and won 3-1 in the Stefan Johansson derby. And when we looked at this last week, we said the big questions were over whether Bodø would be coming out of their winter break as fresh or rusty, and whether they'd replaced their key men who left over that break. Now, those questions were answered cohesively in Glasgow. They ran Celtic off the park, and Celtic have been a team who've used to been running other people off the park this season. The first goal is a beautiful exercise in patience, the second in patterns, and the third, to be fair, is a little bit lucky. Runar Espejord came in from Heerenveen to replace Eric Botheim, who was their top scorer last season as they won the league back-to-back. He scored the opener and made the second. It's a hell of a way to make a competitive debut for your new club. And Elias Hagen stepped in for Patrick Berg at the base of the midfield. I was really, really impressed with him at the base. He sort of dictated really well, broke up attacks, and that was a big slot to fill. Patrick Berg had worn the armband at times. He'd very much been the rock at the base of that Bodø Glimt midfield in the qualifying stages. So for Hagen to step in there and have that kind of say, I thought was really, really impressive. An incredible performance, but especially in the circumstances where they hadn't played competitive football since December. Celtic have it all to do. Josip Juranovic will return at right back, which should help stifle the threat that Ahmed Pellegrino offered. Obviously, he scored the second goal, but he's been really, really good across the course of this competition. Georgios Giacomakis scored a hat-trick at the weekend, which should get his confidence going a little bit more. Dyson Maeda started this game up front for Celtic. He worked really hard, but it was a lot of huff and puff without blowing the house down. I'd be interested to see who actually gets the nod for the start here. I think Maeda might get it again just because of that kind of work rate, and because Celtic might be looking at this and thinking, right, if this is done and dusted, and we've seen results not go their way, or not go many people's way, when you have to travel to Bodø to play Glimt. So it might be one of those where they're thinking about those rotations. Still no Kyogo Furuhashi, still no David Turnbull, we think. The other thing is that Celtic can't train on the artificial surface on Wednesday because of the weather conditions. The last team to not do this were Roma before that 6-1 thumping, which is a pretty ominous statement for Celtic. I think there's probably too much to do here for Ange Postecoglou's men, but as we said, don't write them out ever this season because they just seem to have that belief. But I think Bodø are a really good side. I think people have underestimated just how good they are, and I think they'll have enough unbeaten at home in the Europa League this season. I think they'll have enough to see this through. The other game is Slavia Prague against Fenerbahçe. Slavia won 3-2 at Fener. It was a really, really good battle, a pretty even game. Fener looked like they were right back in this at 1-1 after they got the equaliser. Then they conceded twice in the space of a minute, and it looked like they were shell-shocked by it. They then pull one back, though, late on to leave the tie in a much more interesting place. Young Ferdi Kaglioglu getting his team on his back. He made the first, he scored the second with a little bit of help, a little bit of deflection. But I was also really impressed with Oscar Dorley for Slavia as well. Played beautifully off that left-hand side, scored a stunner to give them back the lead, to really wrest momentum away from Fenerbahce. The home fans were not impressed in Istanbul. A variation of the old "you're not fit to wear the shirt" was sung at 3-1 down. But we've talked about the away goals rule a lot, right? And the lack of an away goals rule here is good in the case of both of these games. Both sides have to look to attack in both the Celtic Bodø game and in this Fenerbahce Slavia game. So this has the potential to be absolutely cracking. I don't think Fener are going to be afraid to go for the jugular here. I really do think they're going to make the most of this. And we've seen some amazing players come through this Fener system. Bright Saïd Samuel was lighting up the championship for QPR before he moved across to Fener. Ferdi Kaglioglu, as we said, from that kind of left back slot, really, really getting forward and starting to push onwards to create and drive them onwards. I think this could be an absolute crackerjack in the UECL. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. Well, all that's left for me to do is to say thank you so much for watching UELtras here on Ranks FC. Whatever you choose to watch tonight in the Europa League and the Europa Conference League, I hope that your games are unbelievable. I hope the chaos continues. I hope the goals continue to flow. We'll be back after the draw for the last 16 is made to look forward to the next round and reflect on how that draw goes down.